Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Friday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky, Talen Horton-Tucker scored a career-high 40 points. What do we do with that information? We'll talk about it next.
You are Locked On Lakers.
Come on.
You are Locked On Lakers. Your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, sometimes on weekends, Andy, but not necessarily this one. We do these on Saturdays and Sundays, too. You want to do an emergency podcast after the Oklahoma City game tomorrow night?
Well, I mean, it depends on how the Lakers decide to show fan appreciation night. My unsolicited recommendation, be very generous. Go all out this year.
Can you give the first 18,000 fans like $100 just for coming in the door?
No. First 18,000 fans, bottle of Sincoro. And then the last 2,000, bottle of Lobos. Like this should be everybody gets a bottle of tequila night at the crypt.
You get to tequila. And although you never, ever, ever, ever hand fans things that can be used as a weapon. True. And depending on how this game goes, you give it to them on the way out.
Yeah. You get it on the way out.
Given what Oklahoma City has done to the Lakers over the course of the year, Friday night they might need the tequila more on the way out than the way in.
We are old enough, Brian, to remember, and this was against LeBron James's Cavs in an irony alert, foam finger gate, the Christmas Day game where Laker fans got so upset they all threw their foam fingers onto the court. Had that been Sincoro bottles, somebody might have gotten hurt.
It's why we don't have machete night. It's just, it's just not a good idea. But anyway, so I'm not sure we're going to fire up the old machine for Friday night after this one. But anyway, often we do. We're going to get to Talen Horton-Tucker, who scored a career high 40 points in Thursday's 128-112 loss to the Warriors up in San Francisco at the Chase Center. Lakers still hanging on at 11-29 away from the crypt, struggling to win games on the road. But this one, Andy, this game featured no LeBron, no Anthony Davis, no Russell Westbrook, and no Carmelo Anthony. So 4 of the 5 Hall of Famers on the team all sitting in street clothes for this one.
Frank Vogel said before the game, Melo was listed in another non-COVID illness. It's apparently been a stomach bug, like the same stomach bug for, I guess, about like a week or something like that. Oh my God, that sounds awful. That sounds...
Andy, old people get sick. Yeah. I mean, look, I don't think anybody was that upset about Melo. I don't think anybody's that upset about Russ. I mean, even in the case of Westbrook, like the shoulder injury that Russ sat for on Thursday is not a new one. He hasn't missed a lot of games for it. I think he missed one game for it. But it's not a new injury. But there was a lot of Twitter chatter
fan appreciation night, Brian, for Laker fans will be Russ sitting. That's actually how they're going to tell the fans we feel your pain.
That was a mean joke. Andy Kamenetsky, shame on you for telling that sort of but it's deeply cynical. It's a deeply cynical joke.
It's
funny. It was funny.
It's sort of them saying our bad, we read the stuff in the complaint box. We saw your notes and we're listening.
Can you imagine if they had that this year?
It's like that in Succession, we hear you, when they're trying to figure out the slogan for their.
I want to know who's in charge for the Lakers of responding to all the negative Yelp reviews. Thank you very much for your comment. We're very disappointed you didn't get a great experience out of this.
This is going to be a talking point later in the show, but based on, and we teased this in Thursday's show heading into this one, based on the leaks that are starting to come out and the narratives that are already in the process of being spun, I can tell you 4 people that it does not seem are reading those complaints and really listening. Jeannie Buss, Rob Pelinka, Linda Ramus, Kurt Rambis. But we continue.
There's a poor intern having to do this somewhere, though.
Yep.
Yeah, so we'll get to all that stuff. But LeBron didn't play. Anthony Davis didn't play. And I will preface this. I do not know how widespread this is. Some people on Twitter, as everyone should understand, is not representative of everyone. Social media is a weird bubble. Even passionate Lakers fans, not all of them are fully engaged on Lakers Twitter. I get it. Still, there was enough of this that it got my attention, and it is one of my least favorite things kind of among Lakers fans. People coming with Kobe would have played. LeBron sat out. AD sat out. Kobe would have played. Kobe recognized the value of getting out in front of fans, all these other things. One of the comments that we got from Twitter, on Twitter at Cam Brothers, was literally from a person whose handle is Kobe would have played. So, I mean, we know where he comes down on this issue.
Yeah, he's partisan.
I would say so. I hate this. I hate this because I think it's deeply unfair to current players. You know what? LeBron wants to play. AD wants to play. But what I really don't like about it is I think it's just disrespectful to Kobe. It's disrespectful. All this, like to weaponize the mythology of Kobe against other players, particularly ones who really do have a pretty strong track record. LeBron James suits up through injury, folks. He does. And if he could have played in Thursday's game, I think he would have. If he could have played in the games that eliminated the Lakers, pretty sure he would have. But I just don't like the weaponization of Kobe and this whole idea that Kobe would have played through everything. And Kobe would have done. Kobe missed games when he was injured. It happened. And it drives me nuts. And I wanted to take the opportunity to kind of point it out because it's one of my least favorite things about sort of the way we talk about and remember Kobe.
Yeah, I mean, it's a double-edged sword with the Kobe mythology, and this is something you and I talked about a lot while covering Kobe, and since his retirement, since his death. Kobe was a master at creating his own mythology. I mean, he was brilliant at it. He played a role in, creating a lot of his perception. He managed to basically market at times being unlikable, being the villain, and he used that to his advantage. And he, the mythology of Kobe outworking everyone, that was real. It was absolutely real.
His work ethic was insane.
Right. But, Kobe was not, to be honest, above at times making sure that you knew it in a way that felt like, and nobody else would ever do this. And Kobe wanted you to know that he was playing through everything.
Yes.
And it's, it is a badge of honor for Kobe that I think he took really seriously. I want to make it clear. This is not all performative marketing. This was something that meant something to Kobe. That being said, I think he did want you to know that he was playing through stuff that other people might not have. We both know from talking with teammates in the past, they didn't always like it. But the larger point, though, the larger point that I want to
when
make,
you say they didn't, just to clarify, when you say they didn't always like it, there's an implication
because they were playing through stuff too.
Correct. The implication is always that, like Kobe's doing. He made it. He would make it clear because he loved the mythology. Hey, guy, my finger is broken. My this hurts.
My ankle's the size of a softball.
All true. But what a lot of guys, what was pointed out to us in a few ways when people would get a little eye rolly about it, some of these were his own teammates, is that we're all doing that. And I don't even mean this as a referendum on Kobe. Like we've talked a lot about the mythology. I don't, and it's based on some truth and it's based on some storytelling and all that. I just don't like it when it's weaponized against other players, where you say LeBron James, you're sort of holding him or someone to this standard, which is mythical in many ways, and ignoring the track. Like Kobe Bryant is like Michael Jordan. LeBron is like Kobe and Michael Jordan. they take their obligation to this might be the only time this person gets to see me play thing, to their credit, extraordinarily seriously. Kobe took it very seriously, and so does LeBron.
Well, that leads to the other 2 points I just wanted to quickly make before we move on to Talen and the accountability thing, the complaint box. First, I will not question whether or not a guy could play through anything, because, like you said, they all pretty much want to be out there, but also it ain't my body, and I have no idea what they're going through. That is the one area that really I won't go. I just will not do that.
It's
on
not fair.
principle. The other thing, though, that I think you have to remember in evaluating this, and it may not change your mind one way or the other, but it needs to be said, LeBron has played 6,000 plus more minutes than Kobe. That is basically the equivalent of 2 to 3 seasons worth of minutes beyond what Kobe had done. But LeBron is much, much further along in the mileage thing than Kobe. And you have to consider that when you think about the idea of Kobe would have played automatically through X in LeBron's shoes right now.
Don't weaponize Kobe Bryant. Yeah. It's not it is not something I like. As somebody who has deep respect for, we covered Kobe for basically the entire second half of his career.
10 years.
Enormous respect for what he accomplished and who the guy, particularly who he became. Don't weaponize. It drives me insane. I don't like it. Anyway, all right, let's talk about THT. 40 points, Andy, on Thursday. What in God's name do we do with that information? Let's talk about it next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, including the Masters going on right now, plus podcasts and reviews for all the leagues right now. They got an MLB preview up with the AL and NL, spotlighting some of the teams that they're really into. Not surprising, the action right now, big on the Dodgers, a lot of confidence with that lineup. Also, though, some intrigue with the Padres and Giants. The NL West is going to be a division to watch, and the Angels, despite having Trout and Ohtani, they are not one of these spotlighted teams in the AL. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. So head to the website, use the mobile device, learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the games start.
Okay, so Andy, the Lakers obviously have a lot to do in this offseason, and very few assets with which to do them in terms of trying to improve the team. And one of the assets that they have is Talen Horton-Tucker. Let's set the contract to some degree aside just a little bit and just thinking of the player. They can either trade the guy to try to get something better, or hope he develops into a player better than this version so that you have almost in some ways acquired a new guy. I mean, that's sort of the baseline of the two options you have with THT. Would that be relatively fair to say?
Yeah, although, again, without getting too into the weeds of his contract, the problem with that is, and it has to be noted, problem with that is he has a player option. He could opt out, and then it becomes more complicated if you're acquiring him.
But he is hard to trade in those ways, and I get all that. But like in just thinking about whether we're better off, the Royal Lakers, we are better off trading him, or are we better off keeping him and trying to develop him? A night in a season where he has been overall a disappointment, where THT without LeBron in the lineup, without AD, without Russ, goes for 40.
Efficient 40 too. 15 to 28
shots.
2 of 6 from behind the arc, got the line 9 times, made 8, and that is one area where THT is actually pretty good. He can make free throws.
I say what you want, inconsistent. Like, not everybody runs out on the floor can put up 40 in an NBA game. That is a thing that has value, and it gets people's attention.
Tell that to Corey Brewer, Brian.
Didn't he put up 50 though?
He did put up 51. Right. That is my favorite random 50 burger of
easily
all
the most random person in NBA history.
In part because Corey was an awesome guy. Like, Corey is a great guy. Well, he's like one of my favorite like forgotten, recent Laker era guys. Loved Corey.
So THT goes for 40. And this is one of those games that if you're trying to show the value of a guy like that, you're like, great, he went for 40. You could also say, ooh, the talent is clearly there. This guy that we believed in, he just put up 40 points. What do you do with this? I mean, I have my own theory and a comp as to kind of a recent history with the Lakers where they were in a similar predicament. But I'm curious what you think when you see THT put up 40 points after a season like the one that he's had.
I mean, it's great. Don't get me wrong. It's fantastic in and of itself, and happy for Talen. In terms of what it means for him moving forward with the Lakers or with somebody else, I don't know if this clarifies anything, because in a lot of ways it accentuates what he does really well that you already knew he does pretty well. And the other stuff still remains in question. You know, he is pretty good at putting pressure on the rim. He is a developing, not all the way there, but occasionally shows flashes as a playmaker. He still has a lot of room to grow as an outside shooter, needs to get a lot better, and frankly has not really progressed at all along those lines. And defensively, he is still, even when you take into account 21 years old, room to grow, all that stuff, he is still a big time work in progress defensively.
He does some things pretty well and then some things less well.
I mean, he's all right. But I mean, all these guys will have moments at times, but on balance, I think THT is okay defensively. He's not great, and he does not, I think, seem to be really making strides. The problem, though, is what you do with him, because until he becomes so good at attacking the rim, like just so good at that, and, you know, like passing out once he draws defenses, or, you know, they collapse on him around the rim, or either the three or the defense, at least one of the other becomes good enough that you can ignore the other one not being there. I don't know if he's really more than just like a very good sixth man, because at that point, he's not good enough to justify taking the ball out of a star's hands particularly often, unless it's like a star like Steph or Clay or somebody that doesn't always need the ball and can shoot, like that you would have along the arc, and it wouldn't seem weird.
Vogel talked about this after the game. He was asked about THT and, you know, kind of his reaction, like when you see and you know, he noted like kind of what you're talking about. They don't get to see this part of it because he plays with Russ, because he plays with other guys, because he plays with, you know, ball handlers, and he's somebody who is most effective when he has the ball in his hands. Talking about THT, and what the comp that got me thinking in contextually, not necessarily an exact skill set, but the context was how we used to talk about Kuzma. Guys are out of the starting lineup. Kyle Kuzma goes in, puts up, you know, 26. You know, he gets an opportunity to be the number 2 or whatever because people are. He puts up. Kyle Kuzma could score, and like we knew he could score, and he had shown that over the course of seasons. But in the context of the Lakers that he played on, that scoring aspect of that part of his game was ultimately the least useful. They needed him to become a better playmaker. They needed him to become a better defender. They needed him to become a better rebound. All that. And to his credit, he did. But the thing that stuck out about Kuzma's talent was interesting, but also useless in context. And I think that is one of the major problems that they have with THT, is that with the roster, at least the one they had this year, it's difficult to give him the right context to play at the maximum capacity that he has. And that's a real challenge the Lakers have to figure out. Either do you trade him probably at a low point in terms of his value?
Probably.
Or do you try to figure out, can there be a roster construction that allows him to be a significantly better player than he was this year?
I mean, to some degree, it will depend on what happens with Westbrook, and if they manage to move
a huge degree.
Yeah. And I remember actually when they acquired Westbrook, and then when they surprised you and I, and a lot of people, by committing to THT, letting Caruso go, and elevating THT to this level. I remember pointing out, and this was in the preseason, they were making a big bet on THT and him being able to make a leap and take on this type of a role right now. And I noted the irony is, if he actually is ready to do that, then one of your first reactions could be, then why the hell did you trade for Russell Westbrook in the first place?
And, so I will say, like, are these games meaningless? No, in the sense that it is important for other teams to get the opportunity to figure out. They look at somebody like THT too and be like, what do we do with this? Which do we have the kind of personnel that you could drop him in and he would be able to thrive, maximizing his best features and hopefully getting others, because he's only 21 years old. So yeah, these games are important for things like that. And, at the very least, THT playing 35 minutes a night Friday and then again on Sunday, and, what he did on Thursday scoring 40, maybe it can add some clarity to other GMs who look at him and try to figure out what they might do with him were they to acquire him. So minor intrigue, but important stuff for the Lakers going into the offseason. An offseason, Andy, that will be dictated in part by accountability and how much responsibility different members of the organization take for this season's total disaster. We're not off to a good start. We'll talk about that next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by Built Bar. Eating smart, but also enjoying that process has never tasted better. You will not ever go wrong with Built Bars. You can treat yourself without feeling guilty. If you've not tried the Puffs yet, you are missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. They are fluffy, marshmallowy. They're protein infused. Whoever heard of such a thing? It's incredible. And they are covered in 100% real chocolate. Great flavors like cinnamon churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. They're all going to be your new favorite. And unlike a candy bar, which is like 200 to 300 calories minimum of just junk, like
ate 6 of those today.
Yeah. And I mean, it shows in a lot of levels. It shows. Built Bars are usually only around 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, but 17 grams of protein, and that's what you want. So go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15, get 15% off your order. Again, the promo code LOCKED15, 15% off at Built.com.
Okay, so one of our big themes, and that's just not just us, many people, is that you have to, the Lakers needed fix this stuff that they've got that are problematic with this season. We all know that it's not going to be easy. And part of fixing something is diagnosing the problems correctly and understanding accountability when you have it. Both of us are a little concerned because, the Lakers have an unorthodox, very small, very insular and somewhat unorthodox decision tree when it seems to come to this sort of thing. It's like LeBron, Rich Paul, Kurt Rambis, and Rob Pelinka. Am I missing someone? It's an odd group. Jeannie Buss, in theory, sure. The accountability aspect of this is critical, and the signs haven't been great. And there's a little nugget in a story written by Eric Pincus for Bleacher Report. We teased this for Thursday's show. I didn't get a chance to get to it, where he mentions the future of Rob Pelinka. And it says, the buzz around the league suggests that general manager Rob Pelinka has another year to get the Lakers back on track. The blame internally, and we just discussed about who we believe internally is in one form or another, appears to be focused on injuries, Russell Westbrook, and LeBron James for pressuring the team to trade for Westbrook. So basically, if I'm understanding this correctly, they're blaming injuries and LeBron for bullying them into trading for Westbrook.
Yeah.
And that is why Pelinka seems to be safe and will be given another year to get the Lakers back on track.
Right. And this stuck out to me, and this was something I ended up debating with Steve Mason on 710 ESPN. I was sitting in for John Ireland, and we were talking about this in terms of just the larger question of who is most responsible for where the Lakers are right now, but also the Jeannie Buss's role in this as somebody who is at the absolute top of the food chain, but also has gone out of her way to paint herself as somebody who largely, if not so exclusively, stays out of basketball decisions.
Correct.
And I was very steadfast in telling Mace that I think one way or another, Jeannie is responsible for this because she is the ultimate shot caller. She has the most power of anybody in that organization. And the accountability of the people around her and her own accountability in evaluating what they do, one way or another, it lands with her. But in thinking about this narrative that's clearly being spun, that basically LeBron bullied the Lakers into doing this Russell Westbrook deal, there's one of two things that happened, okay? One is that LeBron made it clear to Rob Pelinka, hey, I know you got the Buddy Hield thing lined up. Russell Westbrook wants to come here. I would prefer Russ here. Anthony Davis wants him here. And you would agree, correct? This is something that Rob is going to have to run by Jeannie. This is not a decision he can make unilaterally.
Correct. I would say, he would say, hey, Jeannie, this is a trade that has come to us. And I think she would probably say, Rob, what do you think is the right move here?
Right.
And
okay.
he would theoretically say, I think we should do Russ.
Okay.
For one reason or another, we should do Russ.
Okay, perfect. But he is going to have to go to Jeannie. And Jeannie, if she did an even 30-second Google search, would have known that the general consensus was skepticism. And, and Jeannie's been around basketball enough that I think it's giving her too little credit that she couldn't come up with at least a few reasons why this might be complicated on her own. She's not stupid. She's not an absentee owner. But anyway, there's a conversation, as you said. She's going to ask Rob what he thinks. If Rob says something along the lines of either, I love it, I think it's a really good idea, I didn't see it coming, and I love it, or, you know what, I think Buddy Hield would be simpler, cleaner, might be easier. I know Buddy well. I used to represent him, but I still think Russ could work. It's a little more of a calculated risk, a little more complicated, but I like it. He tells Jeannie that. Jeannie says, okay, do it. Doesn't work out. Jeannie from there has to evaluate Rob Pelinka as a shot caller and evaluate herself as somebody who empowers her. But the other scenario, though, the narrative they're looking seemingly to spin is that basically Rob and all these other people didn't like it. They immediately saw the reasons why. I don't know about this. This is a bad idea.
They listened to our show. They were for it, and they heard us, and they were like, you know what? Those guys make good points.
There's a lot of reasons why this could be a problem, but you know what? LeBron is just so powerful. We can't say no to him, and he strong-armed us into making this massive trade that we were all pretty worried from the beginning wouldn't work. If that's the case, Jeannie has an obligation to tell LeBron no. And if it's an issue afterwards, I will talk to LeBron because I am your boss. Point of fact, I'm LeBron's boss. And I'm saying no, put this on me. So if there was really bullying going on.
You say it's a bad, right. My basketball people say this is a bad idea.
Right.
But we're going to do it because we're worried about making LeBron upset. Don't worry about that, basketball people. I will take that bullet.
So if there was really this type of bullying going on and nobody, Rob or especially Jeannie didn't empower somebody to tell LeBron no, that's not just a failing on them. I don't understand why they don't see that's actually worse than them making a bad basketball decision with Russ. Like even as much as you don't want to see your front office make a bad basketball decision that had a lot of red flags and stuff like that, at least they would have made it because they believed in it. It's actually worse to make a bad basketball decision that you don't believe in. That's worse. Way worse.
I agree. And I will tell you, there are two things about this because, needless to say, we're going to continue exploring these ideas throughout the coming very quickly off season. Two things. First, I think we all remember what happened when Rob went on and seemed to indicate that they had total sign off and not doing anything at the trade deadline. LeBron was on board. Anthony Davis was on board. That is what led to League Fest 1.0 in this season around the deadline, and making it very clear that no, and don't use me as a human shield for you. That appears to be, if they run with this, and we're at very early days, to some degree, but if this is something that becomes a more a louder POV, I'm not sure how that ends either. If you do want to extend that relationship with LeBron, and I will say this before we go, the last thing, another sort of underrated, disturbing part of this sentence. The buzz around the league suggests that general manager Rob Pelinka has another year to get the Lakers back on track. We talked about the dangers, perhaps, of having a perhaps lame duck coach in terms of what that does to their ability to, really make their voice heard and be authoritative and all that.
We both think that hurt Vogel this season.
Absolutely. They kneecapped him before it even started. A GM GMing for his job is a terrible thing because general managers have a two-part focus. They are supposed to, in the case of the Lakers, try to put a competitive product, a championship caliber product on the floor every year. But the second side of that coin, even for a team like the Lakers, is they sort of if this was a bank, they'd have a fiduciary or an investment company, they have a fiduciary duty to protect the institution and protect the customers and protect all this stuff. And a GM who thinks I've got a year to fix this thing will do things that are short-sighted in an effort, or not could be pressured to do things that are short-sighted in an effort to preserve their own position, things that might save them, but could also really damage the long-term prospects of the organization. And so if he does have a year, it needs to be made very clear to him in ways that the Lakers would actually back up that, hey, if you can't fix this in a way that gets us back to title contention next year, that's okay if you can reset this thing to a place where we're no longer on a really bad path for the next couple of years. Maybe next year doesn't go the way we want, but you've kind of calibrated all this to where 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, we've got a good chance again. That Rob Pelinka is a good job. If Rob thinks he has to get them to a championship next year or he's going to lose his job, he could do some things that are not in the long-term interest of the Lakers. And it wouldn't even be necessarily his fault for being put in that position. And I do not want to be, I want to look forward to the future. I want to, but part of what makes it possible to fix the mistake, to talk about what comes next. And we didn't get to the coaching odds. There were some interesting coaching odds. Who's going to replace Frank Vogel? We'll tackle that on Monday. But there's a lot of stuff coming up. And the ability to be optimistic about those things, for me at least, and not everybody's going to agree, and that's fine. The ability to be optimistic about that stuff depends in part on your faith in the people who are running the show to do things in a way that are, that are good. And that starts with accountability and understanding why things went wrong the way they did this year. Locked On Lakers on YouTube. Everybody have a great weekend.